she's staring at.
Tokyo Rush Street Racing. Or is it Street Racing Tokyo Rush? Ooh, $1.99. What could possibly go wrong? This is the second best $2 I've spent all year. All the rest are tied. Street Racing Tokyo Rush released in 2021 for Nintendo Switch courtesy of developers and publishers so embarrassed by this title they don't list their names in the game itself, so let me help them out here. There you go. First off, there's some generic licensed music that I'm going to have to turn off because it is what it is these days. Secondly, this is a port of a game that originally appeared on mobile devices a year prior, so right off the bat, you already know how the overall quality is going to be for this thing. And listen, this review won't even last a couple minutes because there's really not much to go into with this game. We'll try and make it interesting at least, if nothing else. So you start off with a couple tutorial runs teaching you how to play the game, learning how to speed through slightly straight lines, and learning how to drift. Once you've cleared the tutorial stuff, you'll get to pick your missions, short driving segments that are classified into various types of trials or traps as the game calls them. Speed traps are about attaining a high average speed or average speed as the game calls it. Time trial is completing a track within a certain amount of time. Drifting requires you to score X number of points, which is achieved by doing good drifts, or attempting to at least. And there's other types of races that will pop up, such as circuit races, special traps, and other things of that nature. So you clear these races, you win your money, you use your money to unlock other cars or upgrades to the one you already have. Racing in higher tier cars will yield greater challenges, but also yield greater rewards, and really, at the end of the day, does any of this really matter? No. It's all the same thing anyway, or at least variation to the same formula. Some tracks will throw a curveball, like requiring you to knock over some key boxes to open up the rest of the track, or actually race in a race with other cars, or some shit like that, but these feel more like a chore than a genuine, worthwhile challenge, especially in regards to the controls, which aren't exactly the smoothest or most intuitive. Against this fairly simplistic button-wise, triggers accelerate, brake, and drive in reverse, while you hold down the A button to initiate your drifting, which doesn't feel all that great here. It's playable, sure, but it's not quite as solid or at times even responsive as most quality racers. You have cars that are geared towards specific strengths, in theory at least. Some handle better, some drift better, but the only real discernible difference is among the tiered vehicles, which generally imply greater performances on the higher tiers. Some tracks will advise you to go with specific cars for a greater chance of success, but you could forego the warning and win the challenge with your stock car anyways. The physics are also kind of ish. Cars have a somewhat slippery feel to them. Crashing into solid objects will grind your vehicle to a halt, and sometimes there's a tendency to get stuck in things temporarily or have controls not work for brief moments or work backwards. Not a fun time. Now, I do like that the D-pad skews the camera angle a bit to give you a better view of your surroundings depending on which direction you press, though how useful it actually is another story entirely. The game also includes the option for touch controls if you're playing in handheld mode, which... why would you do that? Like, I understand on mobile, but why on this? Visually speaking, Tokyo Rush can be best described as the racing game equivalent of a pop station. Namely, it looks light, cheap, and plasticky. Not surprising since this was originally a mobile game, but you figure a year later in doing the port over. The cars do look like cars at least. There's different makes of cars and they're very glossy looking, but they're also fairly simplistic models with little to no real detail. The cityscape is at least visually pleasing in a sort of low-tech way. There's different landmarks to check out. It doesn't look entirely cheap. everyone's driving on the wrong side of the street. Japan usually drives on the left side, not the right. But other than that, this is a totally authentic Tokyo driving experience. Sound is something of a mixed bag. The music, which you're not listening to here for obvious reasons, is a collection of generic sounding techno, rock, techno tune stuff. Couple of singing bits in there. Don't know if it's a licensed tune or some house band making a name for themselves. Decided to chip in a couple songs for some publicity of sorts. I've not heard enough to form enough of an opinion on the music, just enough to know not to include it in this video for obvious reasons. Sound effects are kind of stock sounding sound effects. Cars have different engine sounds, if nothing else, which is a positive, I guess, but I don't know, I've heard worse in the sound department, especially on the mobile front, so I don't know, faint praise at best. So overall, the main meat of this blatantly obvious shovelware title is doing all the trials and traps and earning money to score cars, and honestly, this got boring fairly quickly. So it's needless to say, there's plenty of better racing options on the Switch, and you really shouldn't bother with this game, whether it's only a couple bucks or a dozen bucks. But then I noticed the test drive option, and this is a completely different story, folks. This mode lets you drive around in your car in a completely open-ended sandbox of a city, without boundaries, without restrictions, without consequence. Explore the city to your heart's content, realize there's no map function to keep track of where you're at, see all there is to see, which isn't much, let's be honest here, and then when all is said and done, you have fun with the completely bonkers physics and just crash into shit. It was at this point where I was hit with an epiphany of sorts, where I came to the realization that in the 3 to 4 hours of gameplay, being generous there, going through all the various tired trials and putting up with the daft drifting mechanics, I could have spent all that time riding around this open toy box of a city just crashing into cars, and that would have made the whole thing worth it. It's such a simple, stupid pleasure that teaches an important lesson. That sometimes you just have to make the most of what little you're given, and sure enough, I had more fun bumping into cars full force and flipping them over than I ever did with the actual core gameplay stuff. Sometimes it doesn't take much to please me, and I could safely say that I was greatly amused by this rare gift that this game had given me. And just when I'm about to tie a bow on this thing and call it a review, that's when Street Racing Tokyo Rush delivers its final, greatest, perhaps most wondrous gift of all. The feather in a cap of what has been an enlightening experience from the utter dregs of the Nintendo eShop. Sit back, relax, get comfortable, and be prepared to witness something truly astonishing, mind-blowing, and truly epic. and that was Street Racing Tokyo Rush for Nintendo Switch. As if I need to say it, save your money.